I'd like to introduce Matt. And the way I met Matt, somebody said, you got to meet Matt. Angela, okay. And we had coffee together, and I thought it was going to be about 45 minutes, and after 2.5 hours, I went, what's going on? Because he was telling me all about his psychology of sales and how you approach people and how you get the sale without seeming to. And I was really impressed, so we've actually been talking about him speaking to our group since last summer. And finally we got it together for today. But I asked him for some more information about himself, and I really liked what you sent me, so I hope you don't mind if I just read, because I thought it was worded so perfectly. After 35 years, countless sales accomplishments, and several business ventures, Matt's only strong opinion about sales today is that no one wants to be sold anything. They want to buy what they need and want. Matt knows great salespeople understand this and teaches new salespeople how to get out of the way of the customer and truly help the customer rather than sell them anything. What Matt teaches is not just for salespeople. In a recent Inc. Article, the magazine, titled 8 Things Remarkably Successful People Do, the author reports that when he once asked a number of successful business owners and CEOs to name the one skill they felt contributed the most to their success, each said the ability to sell. Leaders have to sell their ideas to get other people's passion ignited like theirs. Leaders have to understand what motivates people and how to persuade them if they expect the team to execute effectively. If a leader does not know how to sell, not only are they a handicap to their business, they are a handicap to their dreams. It's perfect. So Matt, come on up, and I'll leave this up. You're going to use the whiteboard. Thank you.
Well, I was going to start with the importance of being on time, but really blew that one out. Just real quick, how many business owners in the room? You own your own business, you run your own business? The majority of you, all but one? Oh, you want all but two? Yeah, I know Ellie. Ellie's great. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to sort of customize what I say towards leadership and towards business owners. Doesn't mean that you guys aren't going to walk away with beneficial stuff as well. And really, you guys are going to sort of be my guinea pigs. I spent the last 3 months sort of hibernating. Since you and I met, I've really sort of re-honed a lot of my skills as far as applying to leadership versus just applying them towards selling either a product or a service or whatever it may be. The reason I've done that is, really this recession that we're in, that everyone is all worried about the economy, it's not an economic recession. It's been going on for a while, right? They manipulated currency and interest rates to sort of hide it. But what's happened is the Industrial Revolution is over. It's not going on anymore, right? Really, what's happened in the Industrial Revolution is better, faster, cheaper. So go ahead. Oh.
Can you put this on?
Yeah, no problem.
You can put this in your pocket.
All right. 35 minutes. So I won't turn it into 2.5 hours like when we were together. All right, cool deal. So anyways, make a long story short, we're not in that Industrial Revolution anymore. It's no longer used to be that someone could go get a job. They would make above pay for an average job. Now, that same job is getting competed for, just like materials are. And so basically, everything's getting cheaper and cheaper, and it's a dive towards the bottom. Think about it. Let's take retail, for example. Walmart is the king of cheap. No one can compete with Walmart, right? Even Target said, hey, listen, we're not going to be as cheap as Walmart. We're going to be about 5% more. So there's only one winner on the bottom side. On the top side, right, the exclusive side, there's Tiffany's, there's Neiman Marcus, there's Saks Fifth Avenue. You name it, it's there. Why do those companies who charge a premium, they're doing well during this economic downturn, but yet no one seems to want to follow that model? No one wants to raise their prices and offer value versus commoditize their service and change it into a commodity. If you commoditize your service, you're always going to be competing for the lowest price. So that's my first thing to the business owners out there. If you're commoditizing your thing, if you're looking out there and you say, hey, let's say you guys, a lot of you are in some form of marketing. So whatever this marketing is, you go, hey, my competitor out there is selling it for $10 per unit. I'm telling you, sell it for $20 a unit. If nothing else, distinguish yourself by price. Because that's what you're going to have to do in this age. What's cool about your group is that a lot of you are on the cutting edge of the change from the Industrial Revolution. The internet is making it possible that a guy like myself or a person like yourself can now reach an audience that's global. So now we're almost going into a connection revolution, and none of us really know where it's headed. I remember, I've been in technology for, I think my first computer was 1981. I own technology companies in Florida. I remember when the internet started becoming had my own business when it started becoming a large presence. I remember people saying, oh, they'll never need salespeople again. Everything's going to get bought across the internet. That was true about one item. Anything you could commoditize. If it was, I needed to buy a hairbrush or I needed to buy a set of speakers, yeah, I go to the internet to buy them. If I need to know what kind of car to buy, or I want to know what kind of stereo to buy, what do? I go out to the internet, I read y'all's blogs. I talk to my friend. There's some form of connection that's going on that I'm using. And it's how much you trust that connection is how far you go, right? So, given that, and given the idea of leadership, and then how many of you are onesies? You're all by yourself. How many of you want to grow beyond that? All right, cool. Like Dale said, sales is an important part of leadership. I think it's an important part of life, period. I think if you're going to be successful at anything, you need to understand how to persuade people. The problem is, most of us, will you let me know when I'm at 30 minutes? Okay, good. The problem is, most of us have this sort of resistance to salespeople. Hey, we have this resistance to salespeople, right? We walk into the department store, and we know we need a belt. We walk in, and the sales guy comes up, says, hey, can I help you? And we go, no, I'm just looking, right? And so we sort of have this natural kind of resistance towards salespeople. Why is that? You ever been sold anything you didn't want? Yeah. It didn't matter if it was $1. You might have given them $1 to get rid of them, right? But if you've ever invested anything that was significant and it wasn't what you got, you felt like you got sold. You didn't buy. How many people sell an item they don't truly feel helps their customer client? Glad to see no hands. What I'm going to show you is the idea is basically comes from transactional analysis. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it's a form of psychology, sociology, basically that studies the transactions between two people, right? Great book called Games People Play. Came out in the 60s by Eric Berne, but the idea is that we all have a emotional need, a need for feeling, right? Just like we have a need for food. And in fact, they've shown that if you're deprived of feeling, if you look at those Romanian orphans, a lot of them at 12, 13 years old haven't developed beyond a year and a half. Their brains haven't because they haven't gotten that feeling and nurturing that they've needed, right? So while you were, cruising around as a tiny little baby and on, all these feelings that happened in your life were feelings that helped you create a sense of I, or an ego. Because the ego had to explain those feelings. Some of them weren't comfortable. Some of them weren't understood, whatever it might be. And as this ego formed, you kept using these feelings to form this ego. Now as adults, we go out and we find those feelings and repeat them so that we can sort of feel that sense of we still exist, right? So that's the broad idea of what transactional analysis is. In sales, the way that I use the concept is when you were born and you brought into this world, you were given everything you needed. You were given nurturing, you were given warmth, you were given love, you were given food. You were in your happiest state. And in transactional analysis, they call that the natural child state. It's the Shangri-La of states. It is the state that why you get involved in activities, why you get involved in relationships, why some people get into drugs and alcohol. It's the state that we're all seeking and happy because this is when we had no concerns. There was no games being played. There was nothing. We were just content and happy. And what provided that were nurturing parents, right? And so somewhere along the line, you reached for the hot iron. You went to go put your finger in the electrical outlet. You went and grabbed the knife or something you weren't supposed to. And for the first time ever, you saw this ugly creature, ogre thing, and we call that critical parent, right? So what happens? Baby reaches. No, don't do that. Baby drops what's in their hands. They start to cry. They start to what they call adaptive child behavior. They adapt their behavior in response to their critical parent so they can solicit nurturing parent. They start to cry. Oh, baby, it's okay. And then they get the natural child feel, right? But somewhere between the ages, how many of you have kids? All right, so you know this. Somewhere between the ages of 8 months and 108 years old, when the critical parent comes out, the rebel comes out and says, bite me. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, right? So we know that. That's what children do. So the rebel comes out. Now, in my IT business, particularly when people were going from, coming onto the World Wide Web either through cable modems or T1s or whatever it might have been, they would notice that the routers would go slow sometime in the afternoon. And when I'd come in and to a place and we'd be looking at stuff, I would watch other computer guys go, where'd you guys get this equipment? Right? And when they did that, they went into critical parent mode. What do you think the prospect went in mentally? They went right here, right? Even though the appointment had just started, it was already over. It was now just an exercise for the next 45 minutes until they got him out of the office. If they didn't have a need for approval, they said, get out, I don't want you here right now. Now, I'd come in, I'd see the same crappy equipment, and I'd say, this equipment was a really good decision at the time you got it. I said the same thing. I've said it in a way, hey, it's not going to work. But I stroked them at the time I said it. I went here. How do you think they felt? This way. Now, think about your own life right now. Some of us are very fortunate. We're surrounded by nurturing and loving people. Some of us are starving for it. And I don't know this room, I don't know most of you, but I would guarantee that there's probably a greater percentage of you starving for nurturing than drowning in nurturing. So there's all kinds of reasons for that. But this is why this is so effective. Now, most of the time when you're taught to sell, you're taught, well, show them the facts and figures, show them the return of investment, show them why it would make sense for them to do this, show them the logical reasons. Because, if you show them the logic, they'll get it. That's all adult stuff. And hey, I get it. We're all, obviously that you need that logic. But do you know how we use logic? We use logic to justify our feelings. And I know a lot of times when the logic has been contrary to the person's feeling and they didn't follow the logic. Think about it. There was at one point in your life, there was something that you needed to buy. You went to buy it, but you didn't trust the person you were buying it from. And you needed it, but you didn't buy it. Right? Your feeling overrode it. There's people that are in relationships right now they should not be in. You might be one of them. And for whatever reason, even though all your friends, even though all their people are telling them, get out of it, and they even know, they're still in it because of the feelings that it provides. Feeling is where I want to work, because that's where action happens. So oftentimes, if you're walking into a sales meeting, and you're ready for your 45-minute presentation, and you're going to get up and do your dance, and your dog and pony and all that, yeah, you might have a real entertaining one. But if they're not moved from the inside, you're going to be in voicemail hell. They're not going to take your calls. How many of you find yourselves in voicemail hell? Where you just end up in a situation where, you seem like you're chasing them and it's doing no good. You want to know how to handle that? Take it to a close. You say one of two things. You say, hey, listen, obviously I've done something to really upset you. You're not returning my calls, and I know this isn't like you, so let me go ahead and apologize. And if you're dead, I'm sorry too, right? And I usually get a call back within about 15 minutes to a half hour after that one. Or I call them and say, it's obvious that you don't want to do business and you are just too nice to tell me no. I'm not going to call you anymore. You know what we talked about. You can call me back if I've made the mistake and assumed the wrong way. And I'll tell you why that's valuable. One is, it ends the hopa land crap. See, that's part of the problem. When we get into a meeting with someone, think about it. If I came to your house and was selling you windows, and you really liked the windows, you knew you couldn't afford it, you knew you didn't have the money, would you be stressed? No, you don't have the money, right? So you'd say things like, yeah, I really like that. Yeah, even if you had the money, you weren't going to buy me, blow me off. You wouldn't tell me that. You'd say, hey, they look good. The salesperson, the amateur salesperson says, wow, they like them. I think I'm gonna make a deal here. Sound familiar? Right? So when someone tells me, hey, I really like that, I go, that's interesting, for sure. I thought you were going to tell me you hate it. Why? Why do you like it? Now I get to find out whether or not they're being real. If they start struggling for something or they just repeat back what I've said, then I know they're not there. If it's a statement where I like it because of the way it affects my life, something along those lines, then you know you're getting there. So, how many of you have been in a situation, how much time are we sitting at?
Oh, you've got 20 minutes.
Oh, good. All right, cool deal. So far, any questions?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
When we talk about the nurturing sales,
All right.
there's nothing more annoying to me than when someone looks at me and goes, "You're an intelligent individual, so I am going to," the overstroking.
Yeah.
The hi, good little puppy, and now I'm going to sell you.
Well, that's a great word, sincerity.
Yeah, the lack of sincerity, the lack of, or if I'm walking through a door and you're already telling me how wonderful I am, what are you trying to sell me?
I agree, and that you've really pointed out a valuable thing, and I'm going to take it just a tad deeper. It's sincerity is what you're really calling out, and when you don't feel that sincerity, it of course feels right, and but there's this concept that we all have. I think it's because of the way the Western language is set up, but that we have to close every deal, right? And so rather than say our message and attract the people that are truly our customers that we can be sincere with, we say messages that try to throw out huge nets that try to grab everybody, right? No, I just want the people that hear my message, because then I can help them. But if they don't hear my message, then they're wasting their money. And so I agree with you, but I think it goes even further of being true to yourself as a salesperson, that if you're just saying your message, you'll find that the people that come in your presence, it's easy to be sincere about something that they're involved with. So my point being, I agree 100%. This isn't an exercise of flattery. What this is an exercise is why we do this. And any more questions so far before we go to stage 2? Why we do this is because of what I call the challenger sale, or what's called the challenger sale. So back in early 90s, late 80s, Neil Rackman came up with spin selling. And relationship selling became the big thing. Hey, let me ask you, do this consultative selling with you, and let me ask you some questions, and we'll build this little relationship, and I'm going to bring you some cookies, and it's going to be a feel-good event, right? The problem is, sales typically isn't a feel-good event. If you can buy it online, are you going to buy it from a salesperson? No, because it's not a feel-good event, right? And so we're creating a feel-good event here for a specific reason. Because when people come to buy, remember, they've got their hands and their guard up. And sometimes they say things, I have to challenge. And that's what the challenger sale is about. Because when they tell me something like, it looks good, I have to be able to say, well, what do you like about it? That's a challenging statement, right? Or if they say something along the lines of, do you sell insurance? Is that what you sell?
Yes.
All right, so if they say something along the lines of, I only need $500,000 worth of coverage, right? And you say, I'm sure you know exactly what you need. I wouldn't necessarily back up from them at that point. See, that's a stroke. I'm sure you know exactly what you need. And the thing is, if you say to them, hey, you don't know what you need, you're right there. Now, see, once I've said that, I'm sure you know exactly what you need, let me ask you a few questions. And what I typically would do in the IT world is, and remember, I don't know how many of you have had to deal with this, but when I would go to talk to a business, they'd have their IT guy, whoever that trusted person was, right there with them, right? Yeah, their cousin, whatever it was. And I would have to combat this guy that pretended like he had a lot of knowledge, or the most knowledge that this person knew was this guy. So, and invariably, all of them would be big AMD processor people. Now, mind you, I've been in computers for 30 years. I remember AMD when it came out, and I remember the faults that the processors had and why I quit using them, right? So when all I'd ask them is, oh, wow, great, you're in IT, I love it too. I got this nagging question. I just ask all IT guys, what's better, the AMD processor or the Intel? What do you like better? Invariably, because most of them are cheap-minded, and they want to be that little rebel, they'd say AMD. And I go, well, yeah, but when you do that, when you install the AMDs and that, processor called an instruction to the instruction set on 410, how do you get around that? How do you fix that? And they'd stop. And now, any other thing I might say, the conversation didn't go any further. So I went to him as an expert, and I took him into an area that he wasn't an expert, but I didn't necessarily challenge him hard. But I know exactly what you're saying as far as we can't give flattery. We have to be able to challenge those ideas that people have. You're a life coach of some sort, right? And I do a lot of that kind of work myself. I get paid up front for the whole year. You know why? Because month 3 is going to be real uncomfortable. And if I don't get paid for the whole year, they're going to quit, right? I have to be able to challenge them. And so I use this model all the time. Now, when I first learned this model, my mother has the nurturing of a rattlesnake. All right, there is, by her own admission. My father was never home, provided but never home. And so I didn't really know what nurturing was. And so back 15 years ago or so, someone was explaining this to me. I was starting to have children. And I could sort of practice this nurturing with them and imagine myself before I went into a sales meeting in that same kind of space. And y'all know the 4 stages of learning? That's all right. At first, we're incompetent and unaware. We don't even know that we don't know, right? And then someone comes along and strokes us on our hair and says, hey, buddy. And then all of a sudden, we realize we don't know. We know we don't know, right? And then along the way, we decide, hey, I want to improve that. So now we know, and we know that we know, right? Then we move into unaware competent. We're doing it without even thinking about it. Nurturing is that. It's one of those skills that the more you practice it, the more that it just starts to come naturally. But I don't do it to nurture. I don't do it to make people feel good. I can be nice and do that, right? I do it because it gives me the space to make a challenge on their beliefs that are wrong, right? And if I can't challenge those beliefs, or if every time I do I get a critical parent response, they're not going to grow, they're just going to dig in. And I can't have them do that. So as the sales process goes on, you think about, again, like I said, my mother would probably be a bad example. But who can give you, actually, my mother actually is a good example too, because even with her lack of nurturing, she can still tell me things I wouldn't let other human beings tell me, right? Because I know she loves me, right? And that's what I'm not trying to say go love your prospects, right, like your mother. But my point being is that when we create an environment, when we start to respond with strokes, not false ones, when we start to reward people, they don't recognize it, all right, and they starve it. So when I say, hey, that's a great question, why do you ask? No one recognizes that stroke. So I have a story I tell about the hypnotist. Where are we at? 10 more minutes? All right, cool. Any of you ever gone and seen like Kreskin or Stage Hypnotist or anything like that? Right? It's pretty neat, right? Any of you get called up on stage before? Well, and you got hypnotized. Yeah. And you got hypnotized, didn't you?
Unfortunately, no.
Well, you're not going to like what I have to say.
My attention span's too short.
Well, you're not going to like what I have to say.
Yes, sir.
When hypnotism is actually all about, they say the more intelligent you are, the more susceptible you are.
What can I say?
I tell a story that obviously well, as I tell the story, so I say. I go, imagine that you and I went to a stage hypnotist. And we sat down, and he called you up on stage. And what was your name? Jennifer. And Jennifer, as you're up there, he takes you down, and you're real intelligent, so of course you go down deep. And while you're down there underneath deep, he says, every time he says the word duck, you're going to quack, and you're going to stand up, and you're going to flap your arms, but you're not going to remember any of this, right? So sure enough, you come back down on stage, you sit down next to me. 5 minutes later, he starts talking about duck hunting. So you stand up, and you start flapping, and you start quacking, and the whole time you're thinking to yourself, what am I doing? You start stressing. And I don't know if you know this or not, but when we stress, we fall back further to our subconscious behavior and the instruction sets that are there, where this instruction is. So you end up flapping harder and quacking louder because you're stressing about what's going on, which of course causes you to stress more, which causes you to flap harder, and yada, yada, yada. So you can look at your own behavior, your own squirrely behavior that seems to interfere and get in your way as you progress through life. And you can realize that probably this is some type of instruction set that's in there, and you're just not aware of it. Usually that same behavior creates the stress in your life that creates more of that behavior, that creates more stress, yada, yada, yada. But let's change the story. You come down, you sit down next to me, I say, hey, Jennifer, he hypnotized you. Every time he says the word duck, you're going to quack and flap. Now he talks about duck hunting 5 minutes later. And when he talks about duck hunting 5 minutes later, you stand up and you start to quack, and maybe not, because you know where the instruction came from. So now you have a choice, right? And even if you do it, because you know where it came from, you can go, well, I don't have to stress over this. Once this is over, I'll be able to take it a shot another time. And that's really what a coach's good job is, as far as the kind of work that you and I do, is we come and we bring awareness to a situation. Now, in that story, I usually tell that story one-on-one, right? And I stroked in that story. I said, Jennifer, you're real intelligent, so you're going to go way down deep on it. It wouldn't have worked on you, but it would have worked on everybody else. Now, see that when I say worked, it's not, typically if someone's calling me for my services, I can guarantee they're intelligent. Because they're intelligent enough to figure out they can't do it on their own, right? And so they need help. And then no matter what we do, no matter where we find ourselves in life, we need help. So at this point, does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What do you say to Dale Carnegie's How to Impress and Influence People?
Okay.
That's too much stroking.
Well, I loved the book at 10 years old. It's the first time I read it. I love it now, but I love it for junior high kids. I think it's a book that it's an instruction for life about knowing that whose photo do you look at first in a picture. So if I sit down next to you and I want to make it an interesting conversation, I'm going to ask about you. I mean, those kinds of things. No one wins an argument. I mean, to me, it's such a basic kind of stuff that's kindergarten. And I'm not necessarily saying, hey, it's not important. But the thing is, all of you are investing money in marketing, right? And I don't know how many people you meet with and how many you close, but the number is to get that close ratio up. You do that 2 ways. A lot of you in this room help people refine their message so that they attract the right customer. And with the right customer, you have a higher close rate because you're talking to the right demographic. The other way is to understand how to sell and quit trying to convince people that it makes sense to buy your product and hear if they have the real problem that your product solves. And if you listen and ask the right questions, they will buy your product. There's no doubt in my mind about it. So the Dale Carnegie stuff, all my kids have read it. I mean, it's one of those books I think is, top 50, top 10 maybe. I do a Think and Grow Rich class. It's on Meetup. It's once a month. It's free. You all are welcome. We might start having them in a classroom like this once I found the price out. But the reason I do that is because there's a science behind it. The book is great, but there's some parts in the book that are real gooey, and they're not necessarily got a nice science underneath them, so people can challenge them and want to say it doesn't exist. Yes?
Oh, I was just saying 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, good. Good. Yes, ma'am.
I want to commend you for putting out the philosophy of raising the price. If everyone else is selling it for $10, sell yours for $20. My husband and I recommend that to various jewelry designers and that kind of thing, and we say, oh, this piece isn't selling. This is
IBM does it. IBM does it with software. When the software doesn't sell, they turn around, repackage it, and put out twice as much. And did I have a question?
Well, yeah, I wanted to go. You said 2 important things in there, and 2 important distinctions. I'm adorable, so people come to me and they want to buy from me.
All right.
It's just what happens.
You got it made.
Okay, what can I tell you?
I agree. You are adorable.
Yeah. So with that in mind, not every single person is the client that I want. One of my biggest problems in that psychology of sales is how to turn that nicely and still let them go without saying, hey, you're not my type of client.
Can I give you a couple of sentences? It's real easy. As much as I'd like to think that what I'm showing here is for everybody, I know it's not. And to tell you the truth, if I had you give me your money today, I couldn't give you the type of service that you deserve for your money. And so it has nothing to do with you, it has to do with my limits. And so if this upsets you, I apologize. So I most certainly would always turn it around to some type of being honest and to telling them that, hey, you can, and then at that point I say, you can give me your money, but I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to be able to deliver the level of service that your money buys. And you may still have people give you your money at that point.
Yeah,
but then
I talk about sleeping well at night. My whole goal in life is that I sleep well at night and you sleep well at night. You don't have to worry about that. So that's why I wanted to
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just say it in a nurturing way. You don't have to go, listen, you're not the kind of business I want to do. Yeah, I don't like you. You don't want to say that. I'm going to show you guys one more technique really quick. All right, this is going to be a valuable one for you. All right, have you ever been in a sales call? Right? It's going well. Everything looks great. And so let's say here's no, here's yes. We got a pendulum. And when you first walked into the office, they were at no. And now, oh, sorry about that. And now that it's gone well, it's 45 minutes, hour and a half, they're right here. They're telling you how good it looks. And you say, well, great. When can we get started? Or let's get the form signed or anything along those lines. Well, remember what I told you is that we resist salespeople. So when you do that, you get right here. And you ask them, hey, what can we do? And when they resist you, they go this way. And they say, let me think about it. I need to talk to my mom. I need to talk to my wife. I'm not for sure. Da. Right? So what I do, when they're telling me, hey, this looks pretty good, yada, 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 I go, I'm really surprised by your reaction. I thought you were going to tell me you didn't like it. I get right here. Right? So what do? When they go to resist me, they start telling me why they like it. And what are they doing? They're listening to themselves. They're hearing themselves speak. They're selling themselves. So now when they're all done, all I got to do is go, what's next? And let them tell me. Again, the idea is to get out of the way and let them buy. It has nothing to do with selling. So yes, that's a technique, but it's not a sales technique. That's a shut your mouth technique and let them do the talking. Any other questions? Oh, I got 2 more minutes. Okay, good.
Don't waste them, man.
All right, good stuff. You guys are going to walk out and remember 30 seconds. All right.
I had a question. A lot of times we are doing a proposal to a group, so not just one person.
Mm-hmm.
So
how many in a group?
Usually we talk to at least 3.
What do you sell?
Well, we sell landscaping, but it's
Okay.
to homeowners associations.
Yeah, sure. So you guys, some type of board, and I mean, you got a lot of cankerous or whatever, contentious old people and things like that, right? No, I dig. What I found typically, and I'm sure it's not a one-call close in those situations, right? When I meet with one or more business owners, I will start with the first business owner and the guy that brought me in. And then usually partners don't get along. Or usually there's a fight going on in that board. And I expose it. I'll go, Jennifer told me that the things that were important to you guys are boom, 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 boom. And invariably the person will go, well, I don't know about that. Right? And so then I get them just talking, and then I basically do some counseling at that point. I hate to say it, but it becomes marriage counseling to a certain degree. So it all depends on what the particular situation is. But again, I have to be nurturing so I can start to get into some of that challenging of, well, wait a minute, Jennifer, is that the same thing you told me? I probably misunderstood. And then she goes, no, because now I'm directing traffic. And so that is a little more, it's not your typical onesie kind of sale, but it is. There are ways that you can go about it that are probably much more efficient. Love to sit down with you at some point and talk to you more. I'll answer that specific question, and you can buy me coffee. All right, cool. All right, cool. Yeah, thank you, guys.